Welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Advice, thoughts, and stories from a married couple on cybersecurity, technology, and life in general. Now here are your hosts, Didi and Lital.
Hello and welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. It's another week. Hello, Didi. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome.
Why?
Because playoff season for Omri is starting. So
hockey.
Exactly, hockey. So at
Kids
least
hockey.
At least we get rid of one burden. At least at the end of this week, we'll know if his team wins or loses. They beat every team that's above them in the standing. They lost every team that's below them in the standing. So
I cannot wait to get my weekend back.
we're getting that in April because he still has states and he still has a whole bunch of
I
others.
love weekend without hockey.
I love
It's
this is why I
coming
love
up.
but this is why I love hockey. It starts in September, it ends well never.
Yeah, we have a great guest with us today. So glad to have you. Hello, Ayelet Biger-Levin. It's been a ride here, and I'm so glad that you finally joined us. We said we wanted to have you from day one. And we bring a lot of friends and like people that we know, and I feel like you have probably know each other forever. So
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show. Actually, I think we've been all of us through a lot together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we moved to the U.S. at the same week.
Yeah.
You worked together at the time at RSA
Yep.
Security. So we've been through the relocation, immigration experience together.
Yeah. The first survival year with the kids and trying to get them acclimated
And the
ourselves.
snow, blizzards,
Oh
no
my!
school.
Do you remember the concert?
Oh, yes. Oh, we can tell it later.
You can tell it now. Mainly I'd like you to tell it now because I get to say I told you so, which is the most fun thing a parent can do.
Well, when we just moved, Ayelet told me we need to go see Coldplay in a concert at the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut.
Right.
And she's like, it's a short road trip. It's going to be fun. Let's get tickets. And we bought the tickets for December
Yeah, it was
30th.
different. Yeah.
30th. It was my birthday.
29th.
Without him,
29th.
without you, it
Without
was
me.
just the two of us.
And he was like, yeah, take the road trip.
And I was 20 weeks pregnant.
Correct. And first snow, first time driving in the snow ever.
And it was a blizzard.
Blizzard that we didn't realize how bad it's going to be. A 2-hour drive turned into 5.
It was. We got to the concert on time because they started really late, but it was a very, very long ride.
Scary road.
And a scary one. And I have videos where I just, it was crazy.
It was crazy.
The concert
and we
was
couldn't go
awesome.
back. We couldn't go back. So we spent the night in a motel.
Yeah.
It was an adventure. I didn't make it to your birthday.
Yes.
It was fun.
I had to spend the night trying to talk to the hotel to accept you guys.
Yeah, because of the
And-
blizzard, nobody wanted to
I
go
never
back.
really properly thanked you, so thank you for finding a place
For
us to
saving
sleep
our
that night.
lives. And
Yes.
now you have a beautiful daughter.
And the fact that I made you take the Plug Infinity, that actually
It
knows
was the safest car to get there when
Yes.
knowing nothing about driving. But, since then, I know how to drive in the snow. So
no, you don't.
I feel ready.
No, you don't.
He's lying.
Every time,
So
every
as they
time.
say, everything ends up being an adventure to remember.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
A learning experience.
A learning experience.
Absolutely. And we try to keep things safe.
Exactly. Sorta. Kinda.
Kind of. So, Ayelet, I want you to take us through your kind of like journey, a little bit about career and stuff. And then we'll talk about the fun stuff you're working on these days. Because you have a podcast. You are now an entrepreneur. Really exciting stuff.
Emerging, yeah.
Emerging. Yes.
Sure. So I will be happy to share a little bit about my career, but let's not go all the way back. Let's start with maybe around the time I met you, I guess.
Yes.
It's the beginning of the career in cybersecurity. So we met at RSA Security, where we both worked together in Israel.
You came
And-
back from maternity leave, right in the
Well-
smack middle of that big project.
That's another baby. That's my
Yes.
first.
Life is babies. That's like,
So
All right.
I started RSA Security 2008, and my focus was fraud detection and enterprise identity. Actually, throughout my career at RSA Security, I spent 11 years there, and I transitioned between fraud protection, working with financial institutions to protect the online banking sessions, and I work closely with you on enterprise identity, protecting access to organizations, which you're still doing today.
Yep.
And it was a really, really interesting transition back and forth. I also transitioned between a lot of different roles. So most of my time at RSA Security, I was in product management. I would say about 8 years between fraud products, fraud protection products, and enterprise identity products. And then I also transitioned to professional services, working very closely with customers, understanding their problems, challenges, escalations, and then transitioned to product marketing, which is a completely different and a turn, but I think that's where I found my passion, because product marketing, and I'm sure you'll connect to this, allows me to really connect the true value messages from the technical side, which I'm very passionate about, to, well, from the technical side to
The marketing
the
side.
value to the customer. So,
Absolutely. When
yeah.
you tell them why they should buy this and why it will help them.
and I think, to me, I come from engineering background. I'm really kind of a geek in nature, and I really like to understand things. So I really like to understand their problems, and I ask questions deeply to understand. So it helps me connect the technology properly to that. And then after 11 years at RSA Security, I felt like I need to get a different perspective of the security landscape. And I went to work for BioCatch. And BioCatch is focused on fraud detection with technology called behavioral biometrics, and we'll talk about fraud, I'm sure, a lot more. And I really enjoyed my time at BioCatch.
Well, you got to work with one of the grand masters of the fraud space, which is Uri, who I really appreciate everything he does.
Yeah, Yuri Rivner is definitely a persona in the space, very strong, and he now actually left and started a new company in AML. And it was a pleasure to work with him. And I think there are a lot of great people. Coincidentally, a lot of people moved from RSA to BioCatch because I think there are a lot of similarities in the approach. And BioCatch just took it to the next level in terms of technology. So a lot of great names and a lot of great people. And it's doing really well. My role there, my last role, I ran marketing for BioCatch for the last year and a half. And then what happened was, I realized that we're really focused on the metrics that banks care about, like when it comes to fraud detection, like false positive rates and high detection rates and balancing security and user
Experience, I assume?
Yeah.
How fast
balancing security and user experience. Yeah. And I realized that something is missing. And what was missing is the human side. What happens to the people on the other end? And what has emerged as a large threat, because the security controls at banks got to be so good and so effective, what was missing, or what happened and what evolved, is that cyber criminals turned to attack the weakest link, the human, with online scams. And that's a vector that's growing very, very fast in the fraud space.
Also in the enterprise protection space, we're
Right.
seeing, this is why ORD kind of exists, is because we're seeing that the attacks stopped being from 0 day and started to go after the person.
Right, exactly. The weakest link, the human. All the scams that attack enterprise to gain access to systems and social engineering of new employees, of HR, of impersonation of IT, impersonation of HR to get data, to get access. That is the same approach that cyber criminals are taking to for financial fraud. And I realized that the impact on the human is much bigger than first of all, than we think about. And that financial institutions and their fraud teams don't necessarily think about this on a day-to-day basis. Because for customers whose accounts are taken over, there's typically reimbursement by the bank. Because if someone stole credentials and used a different device to access the account, there's regulation today to reimburse customers. So the financial impact is eventually going to be compensated for, and there is going to be a hassle because you need to contact the bank, it needs to get resolved. It's going to be a process, but it will be taken care of eventually. And it's not something that you did. But if someone manipulated you emotionally to transfer money to them and you realize that was a scam, you have the financial impact, you have the emotional impact, and there is no reimbursement today. And that hit me. And I realized that that's something I need to be involved in and I need to be part of the solution.
This is so interesting. I recently, a friend of mine got scammed and she didn't care about the money. This is so interesting. She just said how deeply she felt bad about being manipulated and believing those scammers. And she was like, I can't believe I believed them. I can't believe that I approved this transaction. So I never thought about it. But yes, there is an emotional toll when you are being scammed, when like you had trust in the system, or like somebody called you out of the blue and, you know, you were walking with your dog and like you were happy and somebody said something to you and you thought it was real. Like people, that the life gets shattered when they kind of like realize how fool I was. And it's easy to manipulate people. So it's really interesting. I didn't think much about it, but because you went through that, it was interesting.
I'll give you another example of someone. There's a very well-known scam called bank impersonation scam. So the scammer, let's say it starts with a text message saying, you have this transaction for $400. If you didn't do it, call this number. Okay, driving sense of urgency. I call the number. Now I'm talking to a scammer because I got a random.
And you think it's the?
I think it's the bank. I'm nervous. They manipulate you in a sense of fear. Okay, so now I'm talking to what I think is a bank, but is really a scammer. And what this person is doing is they're manipulating you. They're causing more fear. They're causing you to take action now. There are all these time bombs they put in. And you think you're talking to the bank. Okay, now let's say that the bank put a control that allows them to somehow magically detect that, although it's your legitimate device and you're using the network elements and all the things that we looked at when we were doing fraud protection, everything looks legit. But somehow they managed to detect that it's not. Maybe the session's very long, whatever, some behavioral analytics or behavioral biometrics. So the bank fraud team calls you on the other line, call waiting. You're talking to the scammer, but you think it's a bank. The bank is now calling you.
And the real bank is calling you.
The real bank is calling you. They're not saying, I'm the real bank, trust me. How do you know who to trust?
Oh, gosh, that's tough.
And
yes.
Neither.
Right. And I've even heard a case where a good friend of mine told me that, and he's in fraud too. He's a fraud fighter, but his grandmother was scammed, bank impersonation scam. They didn't even go to the extent to say that they're the bank. What they told that lady, who's elderly, is that her bank is in on stealing money from her. They're conspiring against her. So they're going to save her. And they convinced her to transfer the money. And they said, your bank might call you, but when they call, just know that they're in on this conspiracy. So don't believe them. So that manipulation is devastating. And it's a shattered sense of reality. It's just like you said, it's completely distorted. I don't know what to believe anymore. And it causes post-traumatic stress disorder. And unfortunately, there are also cases of suicide.
Wow.
People just lose their
Think of all the IRS scams. This really impacted people. Speaking of IRS, this is tax season. Be very, very, very careful because this is the scam between beginning of March till the end of April.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a call from the IRS saying that they failed the audit, that something is bad.
Reimbursement is coming.
No.
Reimbursement is not coming.
Nothing scares people more than the IRS wants your money.
Yeah.
Nothing scares people
and the
more.
IRS will not call you like that. So
yes, they will not.
There's been a decline in robocalls for IRS in the last few years because authorities asked, mandated telcos to do something about it, and there has been a lot of robocall related technology evolution. I actually have a story about an IRS scam. I got a call in 2014, I think, or 15, something like that, and I realized that, they called, I know it's a robocall, but I wanted to see the mode of operation. So I just went down the path. I clicked one, they asked for my name. I gave fake information and I gave a fake address in Texas. I just made something up. And then of course they found that I owe money and I didn't take it very seriously. So they continually aggravated the situation. It started from you owe us money to the FBI is on their way because you have drug smuggling and whatever charges on and they're on their way now, so you better pay. And I knew it's a scam. I gave fake information. My heartbeat went up like crazy, because it's scary when someone is yelling at you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was like, did I give fake information? Oh God, they have my phone number. Never mind, I'm gonna hang up now. So yeah, it's very, very intense. And what I want to do, and my new mission, is to prevent that from happening in the first place. So like I said, there is a decline in robocalls. Unfortunately, they didn't stop. They just transitioned to using text messages and emails and social platforms and dating platforms. And there's so many different types of scams. They're so creative, and they prey on the psychology of human nature.
Yeah.
I got a person call from the IRS, not a robocall.
Oh, person call.
A person call.
Okay. Wow.
A real person.
Yeah.
I mean, our call centers, they employ people.
Absolutely.
It's a business.
Yeah. And they have ways to, the telcos have a way to stop calls based on volume. Also, not only robocalls, but what they do is they actually use many SIMs and change phone numbers all the time. So there's no ability to repeat and blocklist the calls, the big numbers. So they're very sophisticated in that. They know what controls we're using, and they're
It's
just
a
going
moving
around them.
target,
So
like everything.
I'll give you another example of a really nice attack that they did. So as you know, most school systems call centers are automated. They hacked a computer on the school, and they got calls coming from the school.
So as if
So
the
number
school is calling you.
The number
You're
shows
getting a
up
call.
as the school.
The school
And they went
district.
down one
And I
parent.
know that I answer the school in the school.
Yeah,
call.
that's
Exactly.
the only number that I actually answer.
They went
The
one by
school.
one one by one on the parent list. This was very, very impressive.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
So impersonation of the phone number. Yeah. This is super interesting. Maybe we take one step back, because a lot of the people listening are from cybersecurity. And I wanted to kind of like clarify this relationship between cyber and fraud. I think they're very close to each other. They're also different in a sense. So help us understand kind of like how these two worlds come together and come apart.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have this as a conversation. From my perspective, as you said, there are a lot of similarities in the techniques that are used. Mm-hmm. From an org structure perspective, let's start with that. I think that typically the fraud teams currently belong to financial institutions, merchants, e-commerce companies, places where they're dealing with customers and there might be fraud.
A lot of transactions.
A lot of
if you're not,
exactly.
if you're not an organization with a large volume of transaction, you care less, I guess, about fraud.
Right. There's
Cybersecurity
insider
is-
fraud and embezzlement and things like that. But
Right.
when it comes to
Not massive.
what we're talking about, online fraud detection controls and technologies and methodologies, then it's typically for those organizations that perform or have transactions, have money moving around. Mm-hmm. So typically, I would say, and it really, really depends on the organization, their structure. I think in the past, it did report to cybersecurity, but over time, because of the importance of the user experience, it shifted to be under the products team or the digital team, the digital marketing team, and there was a center of excellence for fraud, or it reports to the risk center, which is also it also depends on the country. It changes and varies. What is important is that the cybersecurity organization is always a stakeholder in the decision-making process. They're not disconnected. Hopefully, they work together and collaborate to also find adjacencies, because you can take a lot of risk indicators from fraud and consume them on the cybersecurity control side, and vice versa. And definitely from a knowledge perspective, knowledge sharing and brainstorming and thinking about how we tackle this and how we tackle that. So definitely advocate for collaboration across those teams, even if they're not in the same org chart. From a methodology perspective, I would say if we kind of look at fraud controls, and feel free to chime in.
Yeah.
I know you're an expert on this too. So initially the fraud control started with IP intelligence, device intelligence, behavioral analytics. So looking at characteristics of the different transactions over time. What are we learning about this user? Are they behaving normally based on their activity in the past? The types of payees, and learning what is risky. A new account is risky, a new payee is risky, things like that over time. And then behavioral biometrics was layered on top of that. So how does a user swipe and click and move their phone with the gyro and things like that? That sounds like rocket science, but it's pragmatic and it works very well.
Basically, is it a real phone of a user?
No,
or
it's even more.
automated?
It's even simpler. It's what are your biometric traits?
Right.
So, for example, your mom clicks very differently than you.
Right.
If I run JavaScript on the client, I can see how the mouse moves, how fast you click. Think of how fast.
And
you
it
type.
belongs to you.
Yeah. But what you said is also one of them. So is it a bot or not? Is it a real human
Right.
behind it or
Or
not?
is it
so,
automated?
So absolutely bot detection is part of fraud protection as well. And that's another connection point with cybersecurity because bot detection or bots can access consumer websites and they can access or attempt to access enterprise website as well. So that's one aspect. Are you who you claim to be by looking at the data without asking for authentication, without actively asking the user to participate because of that high focus on user experience?
The Didi and Lital Show will return in a moment. The Didi and Lital Show is sponsored by ORT. In today's world, identities are the perimeter protecting the organization and are the most exploited vector by attackers. If your security teams are struggling to maintain control of identity management tools, ORT can help. ORT offers a centralized platform for discovering, monitoring, assessing, and remediating identity threats to your business. While most security platforms can take weeks or months to start identifying and remediating risks, with ORT, your security teams can get started in as little as 30 minutes and start securing the identity perimeter immediately. ORT will surface the most critical vulnerabilities and give your security teams the recommended action steps. Start your trial today at ort.io. That's OORT.io. The Didi and Lital Show is sponsored by Hunters. Hunters is a SaaS platform purpose-built for security operation teams, providing unlimited data ingestion and normalization at a predictable cost. Hunters helps SOC teams mitigate real threats faster and more reliably than SIEM. Visit hunters.ai to learn more.
Another really interesting part of behavioral biometrics is the ability to look at patterns and say, this looks like a cyber criminal, or this looks like a legitimate user. So I'll give you an example. When you open an account as a legitimate person, you're going to look at the form, the account opening form, fill in the details, look at the terms and conditions. Maybe it's pick a credit card design if it's a new credit card, and it will take you some time. Now, if you're a cyber criminal who does that 50 times a day, you're going to do it very, very quickly. Only mandatory fields, not stopping for a moment. Check the box and go. You're going to also, so you can see the proficiency in filling out the form. Another element in that same activity is if you're a legitimate user, you know your personal details, your address, your phone number, and you use your long-term memory to fill out the form. So your typing will be continuous. There will be no hesitation. But when a cyber criminal does it, they'll either copy paste from, they'll go off screen, on screen, they'll copy paste. They'll type from a list, so it won't be continuous. So all these things are patterns of cyber criminal activity versus legitimate activity that are not authenticating the user so much, but just classifying the activity. So that's been very effective. But again, when it comes to online scams, there's a gap because maybe there could be some indications if someone is on the phone and on their device and the session's really long and they're hesitating before they make the payment. So there could be very edge cases that could be caught. But the thing is, online scams, not everything happens online. People transfer money on Zelle, gift cards. They go to the bank. They send checks.
The ATM. They go and get cash and
crypto. So a lot of this activity can't be or is really hard to catch. And as I said, even if technology is able to catch it at the point of transaction, the distorted sense of reality interferes with making decisions.
And Lital, here's one thing that, as somebody who did both of them, is a very big difference. Because you'll hear a lot of times, fraud detection is usually more advanced than enterprise security.
More advanced than enterprise security.
A lot more advanced than enterprise security.
Because money is at stake?
Because
the ROI also is
clear. The ROI is very, very clear.
Okay.
If you're in a company, if I need to explain to the CISO why I need to buy ORT, Hunters, whatever, to do detection, I need to explain what's the cost of a lost transaction.
You need to explain the risk.
You need to
And
explain-
cyber risk is not something
I'll
that is
give you-
tangible.
I'll give you an example. When you build B2B kind of B2B consumer sites, for example, the thing that we built for our consumers at Cisco, that has a little bit of both because it serves millions of people. Everyone is a Cisco customer, but they're not doing this for themselves. So there's no cost of a lost transaction. It's a lot harder than if you're Amazon and you need to know. So trying to establish fraud there, it's a lot harder. But if you're Amazon, you know exactly. You say 5% of transactions. I'm willing
fraudulent.
I'm willing to take a hit of X amount of transactions to prevent lost transactions. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes there.
Anything above that, I'm not willing to take.
So the money and budgets are very clear and very guaranteed, and that's why you'll see a lot more advanced.
Interesting.
But what happens a lot of times is people in cybersecurity try to implement it back into enterprise security. I had a call from a VC that said, "How about you do adaptive authorization?" And I said, "We Larry Friedman, who you also know very well, and I failed to do this now 3 times, and it never has to do with technology. We solved it technologically 2010. The problem is people. If I'm in an enterprise and I do my same job over and over and over again, I don't want to be challenged by extra factors in an inexplicable way. I don't want to get a screen of my usual system that says, we don't know if you're who you are, so you get 3 screens less. The first thing that will happen is they'll call at IT and yell their heads off. So, and this has happened now multiple times. So this is stuff that the consumer is actually more open to have, if you see your Capital One state and Capital One thinks that you're not in a good state, they say, listen, we're here to protect you. How about we don't show you this? How about you call us, prove who you are, and we'll reopen these fields.
Even we know that as users, we get very upset if like you're trying to buy a flight ticket and you get the extra, thing that is thinking and waiting to be authorized, or you need to get a call, or you need to approve.
Yeah, consumer tolerance for additional controls. I think what fraud is trying to do, or the fraud controls are trying to do as much as possible without user interaction.
Yeah.
Without harassing the user, without asking. And yes, there is risk-based authentication and asking for additional controls later. And with enterprises, yes, some mad people will call IT, but I think there is acceptance that you need to protect the enterprise. So it's that balance that has to be.
But you can put you can top load the controls. So in an enterprise space, I can top load. I can make sure that if you want to do this transaction, always use YubiKey. I don't care if you want to do a transaction over 10K in this bank, insert YubiKey. Otherwise, not going to happen. So this is acceptance in the enterprise space.
And I would say that's also true for commercial banking as well, for example.
But you can't top load.
You have to front load.
You can't front load. Yeah, exactly.
You have to front load the security controls invisibly.
Yeah.
I think another area of similarity where there's a lot of shared knowledge between cybersecurity and fraud is the analytics, right? The user entity behavioral analytics that's done in cybersecurity.
Yep.
Very similar. The data, of course, is different. The elements that we're looking, there are some similarities.
Looking for maybe different behaviors a little bit.
Different behaviors and different data, but the methodologies are essentially very, very similar. And then it's AI. The models or what you put in the models, how you manage the models and supervise them, that will give you the quality of
absolutely.
The analytics.
Question about the players. What do we know? Are they the same, like cyber criminals? Are they also the same players playing in fraud? Is it different? Do they kind of like live in the same ecosystem? What do we know about that?
So again, I'll chime in and feel free to add. So I think there are a number of motivations for cyber criminals in general, right? So you have the nation state hackers, the financially motivated criminals. You have the hacktivists who just want to cause chaos and anarchy and make a point. And some, I'm not going to put a point of view here. I'll probably support some of those activities, but generally speaking, no. And when it comes to espionage is another one, of course. And I would say this. Data breaches, the impact of data breaches, whether it's for enterprise or for consumer, are then the usernames, passwords, personal data all finds itself in the dark web, right?
Right.
And the consumers of the dark web, who are the cyber criminals that are financially motivated or whatever, they're going to use the data for social engineering. They're going to use the data to create new accounts. They're going to use the data to take over accounts. So it's all intertwined. I think it's pretty organized there. You know where to go, where to buy. So it's part of that supply chain. Those who create the breaches, sell the data, consume the data, perform the activities. So it's definitely intertwined. I think for fraud, obviously they're financially motivated at the end of the day, but
I think they're financially motivated in enterprise as well. So I'm going to do the short answer. So, Lital, yes, I believe that these are the same people. It's the same hierarchy that Ayelet was describing. So you get the hierarchy. I call it the shit rolls downhill level thing.
I call it the supply chain.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you start.
You start with nation states.
You start with
creme de la creme.
You start with the espionage in nation states, and when we think of nation states, we think of the NSA and their likes. But there's at least 8 to 10 countries. And as you go down the levels of these 8 to 10 countries, you discover that the guys that built these for these countries start having less and less moral scruples. So the tool that was used to war becomes a tool for commercial gain. Now, if you're...
Many nation states use those tools for financial gain or play both.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Then you start going into what I call the gray scale. What does it mean, the gray scale? So we, all three of us, come from a country that loves the grayscale. They take the stuff that the military built and turn it into
commercially available
lawful
software.
interception and things that deal with gambling and things that deal with all the crap,
adware,
all the adware that we get. Now that's in grayscale. Is this legal? Is this not legal? Because they're spying on us. They're really good at spying on us. Zoom Info gets us a whole bunch of stuff that I don't want to know how they got there. So now you have grayscale. And very close after that comes the not so grayscale. They take the exact same tool that the military's built, and now they want it to get money. There's easy ways to monetize from enterprise, and there's easy ways to monetize out of fraud. It's kind of pick your poison. With enterprise, it's the people that usually want to get a bigger bag. Because if I hack a hospital and ransomware the shit out of them,
you get a few $1 million or tens of millions of dollars, and you go away, and then you drop the data on the dark web and resell it to all the fraudulents.
Exactly.
All right.
So
get more.
So the people that usually go after enterprise are more motivated to get a bigger buck. The people that go after people usually are like the people that would have picked your pocket on the tee.
Although I want to say that has been true for a long time. I think the scam, the amount lost to scams used to be a few $100s, a few thousands. Now we have a new class of scams, the crypto investment scams.
Yes.
We're talking about
Pig
hundreds
butchering.
of pig butchering scams. We're talking about
You did a podcast about it, right? Let's plug it in.
Okay. So these scams are millions of dollars are lost to these scams. So
all the savings of people goes to that.
I'll remind you now again a little bit from our history. Remember that Israel Aloni coming to us. By the way, he's now in Sentinel. He came in and knocked on your office door when we were talking and said, we have to secure the online gambling stuff. Remember when he was talking about this?
Yeah.
Because back then there was millions of uninsured, ungoverned money there, and it was just. And so
still people gamble online and lose all the saving. How different it is.
No, so attacking the big gamblers used to be a lot less secure. They had like their accounts in the gambling sites, and those were not insured. Very much like Ayelet was talking about insurance. So there were a higher class of criminals that used to steal money from the high roller gamblers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now they put a lot of controls in place. The numbers are going down, so they're choosing other places. But I think what Ayelet is saying is that there's the people that steal from what I call the jackpots. The people that if you steal a lot from, it's like equivalent to the hospital.
but it's not. It's very pervasive. It's not. They will steal as much as they can, like you said. They'll steal everything, and if your everything is to a few millions, but also people take mortgages. People are take the money that they don't have is taken from them.
Yeah.
So this is where
Terrible.
tragedy really comes in. But I think it's a gray area. I don't think it's similar to online gambling because I think the gambling sites, not that I think that it's good, but the gambling sites are trying to do gambling, like with chance and rolling the dice and that level. Whereas here it's a scam. It's manipulation.
Absolutely.
It's
Your
different.
choice of spending money versus...
what I meant was...
He was talking about stealing from your account
Yeah.
when you used to gambling.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the moral ethic of those gambling sites. I want to make sure we have time to talk about your new enterprise.
Yeah.
You started talking about the people behind those scams. So what are you working on? Tell us.
Yeah, so in the last few months, I've kind of been thinking about, okay, my goal is to stop online scams before they happen, before the manipulation starts, before people start to go down that rabbit hole of the emotional manipulation, those conversations, the fear, everything that happens to them that we want to avoid. And just like you said, your friend cared more about the emotional side than the money.
Absolutely.
And hopefully it wasn't a lot of money. And so I'm working on a technology solution in that space, very, very early stages. In addition, I started a podcast called Scam Rangers. And
Check it out.
the podcast is about the human side of fraud. And what I do is every week I interview someone who is what I call a ranger, a scam ranger, a fighter who works with victims or across what I call the scam life cycle. So from that very first text message or phone call to the manipulation, to the monetary transaction, to then trying to recover law enforcement, etc. So I had a district attorney who's trying to recover crypto from pig butchering scams, from crypto scams. Someone who used to be a fraud strategy leader at a credit union, and someone who's an expert on human trafficking, which is a whole long story, but to perform these pig butchering scams, now they're trafficking people in Cambodia to actually go and scam people. So, and I also talked to someone from Amazon who talked about what they're doing from their perspective, because there are a lot of brand impersonation scams. So brand abuse is a big concern to them. So e-commerce merchants, I think that's very, very interesting for them to hear what Amazon is doing and take some blueprints from there.
So you're planning to have technology that will help people recognize that they're speaking with the scammer, that they are being scammed. Is that the direction?
That's the idea, yeah.
Amazing. I'm sure that fits very well also with something we talked with Gabi a few episodes ago about education.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing better than being aware and stopping and asking yourself, is this true? Am I being scammed? I think just being aware, I mean, it's not bulletproof. We all can be scammed. I mean, we have the tendency to, the sense of urgency.
To be humans.
Yeah,
We're humans.
we're
and
humans.
that tendency is what they prey on.
And they prey on the niceties of a lot of us.
Exactly.
So
we want to be helpful.
We want to be helpful. You don't want to be perceived as a bad person.
I think you really don't want to be a bad person.
Yeah.
And
that's a very
human
long
nature.
that's a very long conversation of are we naturally bad or are we naturally good?
So I'll plug it here that I wish whenever the technology is ready that all the banks will invest and use, because what's better than, educating the users that it exists and helping them prevent it, because it's not just their side. You cannot kind of bulletproof yourself if you're not using the user itself. Yeah.
Right.
Excellent. Well, that's super exciting.
Yeah.
And check Ayelet's podcast. We'll put in the show's notes a link to the podcast.
Scam Rangers.
Scam Rangers.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Time to play? Are
Time
we
to play
ready?
the game.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's go.
And now Lital and Didi present Prove You're Not a Robot. 3 final authenticating questions for our guest.
So, Ayelet, if you were a cybersecurity superhero, what would be your name? And who would be the actress who will play you in the Hollywood movie? Or, Israeli movie that will come afterwards?
Maybe it will be Bollywood.
Yep.
So definitely the Scam Ranger.
Yes.
That's an easy one. And I'm debating between two Israeli actresses, Gal Gadot and
Obviously.
Well, Gal Gadot, everybody knows.
and not Tishbi, but they're both in Hollywood. Both women are powerful and leaders and stand for what they believe in. So absolutely.
No, Tishbi went to school with me. Another Alliance graduate.
Oh,
Yes.
awesome. So she speaks French too.
Je ne parle pas français. Pas du tout.
J'oubliais tout.
What is your favorite hacking breach horror story?
My favorite.
Or least favorite.
Or least favorite?
And it could be fraud story as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say, because the hacking story, I'm sure you guys talked about it on the show a lot. I was kind of, when RSA was breached, I was the one who was not the only one, of course, with hundreds of other people holding the fort and not dealing with a breach.
Yes.
So that horror story for me was more like just keep on moving with half the people. You were gone for months and some other people, so we just had to keep going. But I would say, to me, I'm going to generalize here. I think that the horror story is not a particular breach or hack. It's more the fact that people don't understand the implications of it. And I think all of us in cybersecurity do. But people are not careful with their own data. And how do we ensure that even if there is a breach, people are protecting themselves and not using the same password across all social platforms and work? And that is something that we need to deal with. And speaking of about Gabi Friedlander, he and I will hopefully, we're talking about going to schools and starting to educate them about these things like password. It has
So
to start
important.
very, very young.
Very young. The
Those
minute
habits
you get
form.
your cell phone.
Yeah, and Gabi says this:
maybe.
you give your kids a cell phone, and it's like giving them the keys to the car. Go drive without learner's
training.
permit, any training. So
Same
we
about sitting on the computer and clicking on links.
yeah, absolutely. So that's something that we want to do, and I think that's the horror in it. And I'm terrified about this generation that is just growing up with Roblox and talking to people, and I'm talking to when they're very young, and they're that sense that there are strangers out there, and I can talk to them, and I can trust them, and that's so I twisted a little bit the question. but-
Perfect.
Answer whatever way you want. Because everybody answers AI on the revolutionary part, I'll ask, how do you waste your time on the internet?
How do I waste my time on the internet? Oh. So I decided a few years ago that Facebook is wasting my time. So I'm not wasting my time on Facebook anymore because I felt like I go on Facebook, I'm 40 minutes past and I didn't even mean to.
You
I was
just
looking for
scroll.
email or whatever, and so I stopped doing that. So Instagram from time to time, but LinkedIn is definitely the way I spend my time. And I'm not going to say waste because I do learn a lot on LinkedIn. There's a community. I feel like fraud fighters are there. I just recently saw an article about coffee and fraud fighters and what happens to the world if coffee goes away, the amount of money that's going to be lost from fraud because fraud fighters don't have coffee to drink. So that's my entertainment.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
We will not be able to fight it without coffee.
No.
We will not be
I
able
have
to.
coffee
We will not be able to
24/7.
survive the day.
Yeah. Coffee is our fuel.
Exactly.
Amazing. Anything else we need to share with our listeners? Last thoughts.
Yeah, I think part of what I'm trying to communicate and to get everyone to think about is these scams can happen to anyone. And we just talked about they prey on human nature, and education is super important, but it's not enough because one moment off guard and it can really happen to anyone. It happened to me last year in April. I have a long story that I'm not going to get into now, but it's on my podcast. But basically, I eventually stopped. I realized they were trying to get me to install a remote access tool. So
Yep.
at that point, I'm like, okay. But I ignored so many red flags on the way, and I'm an expert on this. I know about this, but I almost fell for it myself because I was in a situation where I was hoping that someone will help me.
Yep.
And my point is definitely show empathy, but also if it happens to anyone, they shouldn't feel ashamed. And to the cybersecurity community in particular, I want to say, show empathy.
Absolutely. We
show
are
empathy.
not good at that. Like, we like to blame and poke at them,
Be
say this.
smarty pants.
Yeah,
No,
stupid.
it can happen to anyone. And people need to know
And
that it's okay. It will happen to everyone. People need to know that it's okay to share and speak up, because that helps support those emotional traumas after.
It's very similar to what we say about breaches. They will happen. All organizations will eventually be breached. Unfortunately, many individuals will be scammed, part of fraud. We shouldn't be ashamed. We should find a way to first recover. I guess there should be also ways to advise people on how maybe the money cannot be recovered, but maybe they need some
Sometimes
trauma.
money can be recovered, and it's important to report immediately, because that helps recover money, especially
Who to report to? That's important if people are listening.
Yeah. Local law enforcement, FBI, those are the starting points, FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And sometimes they don't have the ability to take on all the workloads, but that's definitely start with your local law enforcement. And there's a team in California that's really trying to teach law enforcement globally. They created a blueprint to be able to analyze crypto scams and seize the money.
Yep.
So that there is a lot of awareness in law enforcement that cybercrime and scams are crimes that need to be taken care of, and there are systems to recover the money. So definitely reporting. And then there are also support groups for scam victims, which exist out there and
Can help with the emotional part of it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Very helpful. You're doing a great job. So important.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us
Thanks,
at the
this was
Didi
awesome.
Lital
Thank you.
Show. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks Didi. Thanks Ayelet. We
Lital.
are on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review and share it with your friends. See you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.